In this video, I will be discussing the 7 shapes of number knitting. So the first shape is a square, and you cast on and then knit across. The whole thing is in garter stitch. I made all of my sample shapes here on 20 stitch shapes, and so I cast on 20, and then 20 ridges up would equal the dimension of the 20 stitches across. So 20 stitches times 20 ridges is going to give you a square. But in garter stitch, in order to get 20 ridges, you have to knit 40 rows, because one ridge is composed of two rows to give you that ridge on each side. So this is shape number 1. This is a square. Shape number 2 is a rectangle. I don't have a sample of that, but basically you could either knit it wider or you could knit it taller, but it's the same idea. A set number of stitches and however many rows tall that you need. There aren't any decreases or increases, and it's just knitting. Shape number 3 is a triangle, and depending on which way you need it to be, it can either be a right or left triangle. So to knit this, I cast on 20 stitches, and notice that I've worked a chain stitch edge. At the beginning of every row, you slip the first stitch. That'll give you this nice chain stitch edge. And then on every odd row, you knit together the second and third stitch. And so there's a single decrease at the beginning of every odd row. And then when you get to the end, you purl the last stitch and then knit across, always slipping the first stitch and purling the last stitch and working your decrease on stitch 2 and 3. Do that until the end and you get a triangle. Shape number 4 is probably one of the most popular in modular knitting. This is usually what the scrappy memory blankets are made from, because mitered squares they're honestly so much fun. You start out with, in this case I did 20 stitches plus 20 stitches, an even number of stitches, and then knit back. And then starting on row 3, what you do is you place a marker in the center, and the 2 stitches before and the 2 stitches after the marker, you knit those together. And so at the center of every odd row, you're going to do a double decrease. And then on the even row, you just knit back. And again, once you get to the center of every odd row, do a double decrease. And what it does is it gives you this nice diagonal line, and it gives you a square that's bisected in the middle. This is shape number 4 in number knitting. Now, shape number 5 for number knitting is similar to the mitered square in that it's got that double decrease in the center, but this is called a divided triangle. And so it incorporates the edge decrease of a regular triangle with the center decrease of a divided triangle. And so what that means is you cast on your number of stitches, place a marker at the center, slip the first stitch, the second and third stitch, knit 2 together, knit until 2 stitches before the center, knit 2 together, knit 2 together, and then knit to the last 3, and then knit these, the second to last and the third to last, knit those 2 together, and then purl. And so you work a single decrease here, a double decrease here, a single decrease here, and then knit back. And so essentially what that means is you're decreasing 4 stitches on every odd row. And so what's really interesting is that because you're decreasing the stitches at such a quick rate, this shape goes lickety split. It is so fast to knit. This is called the divided triangle. Now, up to now, there's only been the use of decreases in knitting the shapes, but the parallelogram, or what she calls the single wing, and when I say she, I am referring to the author, Virginia Woods Bellamy, who wrote this book in the 1940s, published it in 52. So Bellamy added at this point the use of increasing in her shapes. And so what happens is that to get this parallelogram, again, I'm working with a shape starting with like 20 stitches for the base unit. So you cast on 20, knit back, and then in row 3, slip 1, knit 2 together, knit across to 1 stitch before the end, increase a stitch, and then purl the last stitch. So in every odd row, you're going to decrease on one side and increase on the other side. And what that means is that your stitch count is going to stay consistent throughout the entire shape. I found though that because I'm decreasing on one side and increasing on the other, the one side, the decreased side, tends to be a little bit more floppy, and the increased side tends to be a little tighter. You can see how this one kind of curves a little bit. And so you may want to adjust your tension to help fix that. And the reason for that is because usually what we do to increase a stitch is to grab the yarn in between the last stitch and the second to last stitch and twist it and then draw a new stitch through that. And so that effectively tightens up this edge where you're doing the increased stitches. And the decreased edge is always going to be just a little floppier. So you may want to adjust your tension to account for that if this difference bothers you. Shape 7 in number knitting is what Bellamy refers to as the double wing, or in the patent application, she refers to it as the double parallelogram. So the way that I knit this is I cast on 20 plus 20, knit back, and then at the beginning of the row, you're going to do a single increase. In the center where you have your marker, you'll do a double decrease. And at the end of the row, you'll do a single increase. So increase, double decrease, increase. And so that's going to leave the stitch count of each half of this consistent all the way up.